Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Yes, hello, you inquisitive bunch. This is Ask Rob and Rob. Thank you for joining us for this very straightforward podcast where we answer your questions. There's two of us, there's two of you asking questions, and we come up with two, hopefully, useful answers. No variation to that format today, so we will get straight into it as soon as, Rob, you've reminded people how they can ask a question of their own.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got it saved in your phone by now, but if you haven't, well, the number to ask us a question is 013 808 0035. That's 013 808 0035. Wow, I've read it out that many times now that I no longer struggle with it. Hurrah! Or you can go to thepropertyhub.net/ask. That's thepropertyhub.net/ask. Super simple to do, and that's exactly what Sam's done.
Hi, Rob and Rob. It's Sam Jones again here from the Brecon Beacons in Wales. I hope all is well with you guys. As always, thanks so much for the information you share. My interest in continuing to grow my portfolio really returned when I found the podcast a few years ago. I'm cheekily asking a second question for the show. When presenting ideas and experiences and strategies, you guys almost always agree on everything. And I wondered if you could talk about any areas in which you actively disagree with each other or have a differing approach. It could be to do with strategy, locations, tenant types, anything really from the world of property or business. I'll look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again.
What a great question. Love this one.
No, it isn't.
Rob, you beat me to it. I was going to be the cheesy joke. We're so aligned that I think that gives you a little preview of the answer. Where do we disagree? We were having a quick chat about this earlier, and we were having to really dig deep to find areas where we did seriously disagree. And there's a reason for that we'll come on to. But I think probably the area where not we disagree, but where we have a slightly different focus is that I historically have been more interested in yield over capital growth. That's kind of been where my focus is. That's the first thing I want, and sort of saw growth as a little bonus. And Rob is probably more focused on capital growth. And if he has to settle for slightly less yield in order to obtain that capital growth, then he's okay with that. Now, we're coming from different perspectives on that, but it doesn't lead us to make dramatically different decisions. In terms of the type of areas we're interested in investing in, all pretty similar. When we come to put together episodes on like where to invest in the coming year, we're not miles off. When we look at our predictions for the coming year, we don't radically disagree either. All pretty boring, really. But Rob, there's a good reason for it.
There is. And actually, before we go on, you've tried to pick a point out where we disagree. But actually, I don't think we disagree that much, because if you wanted just yield, you'd probably invest in one of your favourite places like Burnley, where you get, sorry, Burnley, you're getting picked on again, where you get a higher yield. But I guess you've got it in the back of your mind, maybe even subconsciously, because you're still picking areas with yield, but you're also tipping to see growth in as well. It's just that you're not relying on it. So you are wanting it, and you are strategically picking areas where you expect it, but if it doesn't happen, you're relaxed. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, exactly.
So
right.
I don't think we're that far apart, even on the something we disagree on, which probably makes it very boring. Sorry, Sam. But I think the reason why, there's a few reasons why behind this. The first is, I think a lot of people do disagree in property, but that's because they are very fixed on a certain opinion or strategy or way of doing things. And it's often what they've experienced themselves. And I think we're very self-aware of making sure we avoid like strategy bias or a bias of any sort when it comes to property. I think property is a common sense game. A prime example of this would be, we're not anti-London, although people probably think we are. And actually, in some point in the future, we will definitely both invest in London. I can't see it not happening, but it's just not now. And that's the point. It's not like we can now never go and invest in London, even though we've talked quite strongly about not investing right now. We're not saying that at all. We're not anti-London for the rest of our lives. We will definitely at some point invest in the future, but we just follow what makes sense. And we don't get fixated that we must always defend an idea. It's like I see people get fixated on types of properties as well. Like, this is the best, that you must never invest in that. And actually, there's good reasons for people to invest in all different types of properties because it's going to be what's best for them. So I think really, because we're both open to ideas and don't have a strong bias and emotional attachment to any one particular strategy, area, or belief, that it means that we don't disagree because we're pretty open, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the heart of it. We're kind of aware that everyone is different. And so you get it all the time. People will, if you say to someone that you're interested in flipping some properties, they'll go, oh, you don't want to be flipping. You'll have a nightmare with your tradespeople. And I did it once and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, well, maybe, but we're different people. And that's why whenever someone asks me, like, oh, what would you do in this situation? I'll say, well, I can tell you what I'd do, but it has nothing to do with what you should do because we're different people. Because we're not in love with a particular idea. And our job is to share lots of different information and give you ideas about what you could do. And then it's your job to decide what you should do based on you. We don't particularly care what you end up doing in a lovely way. Like, we want you to do well, but it's going to be your choice. And if we say go and invest in apartments in Manchester and you go and buy a bungalow in, you know what, even Burnley, we can still be friends. It's okay.
And similar things apply to business as well. We actually, before we started the podcast together, before we came up with a business idea together, which was yellow lettings, as you probably know if you've listened to the podcast for a while. But one of the things we did before, and I think this is a good lesson for any property joint venture, is we did something called a founders survey, where we basically interviewed each other just to understand our views and opinions on different aspects of business, what we wanted from the long term. And I think that can be very much replicated in property as well. And you'll be sickened to know that out of the 25 questions, I think we agreed on like 24 and a half, and the half was probably, we could argue, was yes as well. So I think we were meant to work with each other. And I think also being diplomatic and unemotional to point of view in business as well helps as well. Have we always 100% agreed on everything in business? We've agreed on a lot, the majority of things, but I think we're both willing to respect each other's ideas, and if one person feels particularly strong about an idea, then we're happy to test it at the very least.
Yep, so there you go, Sam. Probably you were hoping for all kinds of dirty secrets in there and for the fists to fly, and sorry to have to disappoint you. It was a great question, though. Thank you for asking. Now, it'll be very embarrassing if after all that we vehemently disagree on this next question from Izzy from Bath. So let's have a listen and see.
Hi, Rob and Rob. I'm Izzy from Bath. Just have a question regards the current state of play with government policies changing. We're all aware of them trying to dampen the property market as much as possible. And with the government policy changes, stamp duty and S24, can we assume that the volume of buy-to-let investors is decreasing? My strategy is property sourcing and deal packaging. But as the investors play a key part of the business, do you see this being a problem? Do you know of a pivot strategy that will cover a property source's income during the phase of unsettledness if it is a problem? In your opinion, how would you rate the strategies from top to bottom, considering the government policy changes and Brexit on their way? I'm also starting a rent-to-rent program as well, and wondering whether that would be a better one to pursue most of my efforts, because their policies haven't affected that strategy yet. Thank you. Great work. Bye.
So, Izzy, thank you. Can we expect to see less buy-to-let activity? Well, the data so far, bear in mind we haven't had a long time since this has all happened and all the changes have been implemented, but so far, buy-to-let investment has continued to be as strong, if not stronger, than before. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if the media becomes negative, or what I should say, when the media becomes negative around some of the things that's happening in the property market, particularly London. It may switch a few people off to buy-to-let. It certainly could happen. Wouldn't be shocked by that. But I don't think it's the tax changes alone that have done that. I think the media, worryingly, actually influences the buy-to-let market more than I'd like to think. So, can we see less? No, if there's money to be made, which there is, I think people will still invest in property. But Rob, the more interesting question is, what do we think of the changes?
Oh, that is an invitation there, isn't it, to go on for about 20 minutes or so. What do we think of the changes? Well, I get what they're trying to achieve. And it's another of those things where I don't have a strong entrenched view. It's not like I think property investors are special or doing the world a huge service or anything else. When things start to get out of alignment and they start to have an impact, which in the southeast of England, they definitely are, then something needs to be done. I think that the things that they are doing are the wrong things. I don't think they're going on about it in the right way, and I don't think it's particularly going to help. But I kind of see what it is that they're trying to achieve. But what about the changes in terms of what it's actually going to mean for individual investors? Well, there's a group of investors who are going to be very, very seriously hit by this. Investors who've already got large, highly leveraged portfolios held in their own name are going to come out of this very badly indeed. Smaller scale investors or newer investors who are yet to start are in a perfectly good position because they get to be set up properly from the start. And some of those will actually be in an even better position because they're forced to think about things they otherwise wouldn't have done. And then there's a stamp duty change as well, which I do think is a net negative because it's just going to gum up the market and cause fewer transactions to happen overall. It's a general principle that whatever you tax, you end up getting less of. And so if you tax property transactions, you're going to get fewer property transactions. In a way, if that's investors, maybe that would be seen as a good thing. But it's also going to prevent owner-occupiers from moving house, which means stock is going to be misallocated. And that's going to have consequences as well. So it's a real mix of kind of different motivations and different aims. It's not how I would have gone about doing it, but then I'm not a politician, luckily. Otherwise, people would hate me even more than the people of Burnley hate me.
Yeah. Similar, sorry, Sam, previous question. Similar points of view. What I would say is, again, I can see the logic and what they're trying to do with some of it, particularly the stamp duty. Kind of makes sense if you don't think it through on what they're trying to do. But when you think it through, you realise it's not that good of an idea. The changes around taxation, though, and not being able to use the interest as a tax-deductible expense anymore, I think it's just a nonsense, and I think it's unfair. I'm all for paying tax. I'm not against tax and the stamp duty. You know, I don't hate paying it. I'd rather not pay it, but who loves paying more, I guess. But I'm comfortable with it. But I am uncomfortable with the tax changes and now being unable to deduct interest from the income, which doesn't seem like any other business available or out there. So that doesn't make sense to me whatsoever. I think the logic is flawed and I think it's very unfair. And we'll see if that sticks. It certainly will do for the short term, but will it for the long term? We will see. And then finally, we look at, will rent to rent become more attractive as a result? I think rent to rent is a very different strategy altogether. And it's not really property investments. It's a property business. So will it become more attractive? I don't think it'll ever go mainstream because it's very difficult to implement. And a lot of people sell courses on rent to rent because the talking about doing it is a lot easier than implementing it. We've talked about rent to rent before on a podcast. So go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast and you'll find a search bar where you can search for rent to rent and we go into more detail. But more attractive, less attractive, I don't think it'll make much of a difference. I don't think it'll ever be a mainstream strategy.
Well, predictably, I won't disagree with that. Thank you very much for that question, Izzy. Thank you to Sam for your question as well. And if you've got a question of your own, don't forget, just call 013 808 0035, stick it in your phone, or go to thepropertyhub.net/ask. We'd love to hear from you. And we'd also love you to listen to the Property Podcast when we return on Thursday. Until then, have a great couple of days, and we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.